all. So when organizing this webinar, we try to approach two sectors of population that are affected in different ways. A pediatric one, where academic performance is an important issue, as well as the adult one with high-risk professions, where sleep deprivation can have a relevant impact on safety, namely air crews where fatigue and sleepiness are usually underreported. So, Barbara Strazizar is not yet here, so I think that we are going to change the order and present the second speakers, goes to first speakers. I think the Professor Acasted don't need much introduction due to all the important work done in the sleep research field. Professor Acasted is a professor of behavioral medicine at Stockholm University and Karolinska Institute and the head of the Institute for Stress Research. His research focuses on stress, sleep, work hours, and regulation. Recovery, work hours, and sleepiness and safety, in particular in the role of sleep in fatigue regulation. Today, Professor Acasted is going to talk about a very challenging and interesting theme, which is flight time regulation and air crew sleep duration and sleepiness. Welcome, Professor Acasted. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. I'll start by trying to share my screen. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yes, all good.
We okay now? Well, this is about aircrew sleepiness and regulatory efforts. I've selected this area mainly because aviation is the industry where awareness and countermeasures against sleepiness is most advanced. And there have been several studies in the last years that add to previous knowledge. So I want to acknowledge input from Mikael Sallinen and Henk van Dijk, Anna-Lose Mai and Thomas Klevets and others. This is to large extent a collaboration by ourselves and the Dutch Institute of Aviation Medicine, I think it's named, and the German Institute of Aviation Physiology. The purpose of this presentation is to present briefly the regulatory efforts of aircrew work hours. It's called flight time limitations, FTL. So I'm going to use the term FTL, which is the way work hours in the air are regulated in order to prevent fatigue or sleepiness. I must add that we're talking about sleepiness here, but in aviation industry and much other areas of society, one talks about fatigue, but this is actually sleepiness. So I'm going to present data from 3 studies with a particular bearing on the flight time limitations. First, the background. Like I was alluding to, the awareness is quite high in aviation and it's taken seriously. So the major enforcer is the European Aviation Safety Authority, the EASA, which determines the rules for safe aviation and also supervises how aviation industry adheres to regulations. And they have the power to withdraw a license to fly, for instance, if a certain company doesn't adhere to regulations. The rules concerning sleepiness are found in what's called flight time limitations issued by the European Commission via the EASA. So it's a EU Commission product. Now, at present, the regulations are subject to evaluation. They were established in 2014. So the purpose is to carry out research on their efficacy in fatigue mitigation. And one such study has been carried out where we have been part of, and the other study was going to start a year ago, but then the pandemic came and everything has been postponed for the second half of this study to December 1st, provided that aviation has recovered by then. So what is regulated in the regulations? Well, it's actually based on the number of sectors, which is flights. It's called sectors in this area. In some cases, they are called legs, but sectors is a term we're using here. Is the official name. There's a number of factors that you flow during a flight duty period. Flight duty period is the period between start of the first flight of the day and end of the last flight of the day. The other factor is start time that is regulated. And the third factor is what they call encroachment on the window of circadian low, that is 200 hours to 5:59 in the morning. So if you fly into that area, you have a lot of reduction of the amount of flying that it can do. So sleep is not directly regulated, but sleep is really the key of the whole thing. But that is to be proven. The regulations also cover acclimatization due to time zone shifts and accumulation of flight duty time across a week or month, and daily rest periods and fatigue risk management. But we won't get into that today. It's going to be too long a presentation then. Now, this is the key thing. So the maximum daily flight duty period are regulated through sectors, start time, and window of circadian low. It's 2 to 6 in the morning. So this is the table that rules everything. Start of the FTP is the rows, and the number of sectors is the columns. So as you can see, for a day flight, flights starting between 6 and 13:30, they are having shorter flight time or flight duty periods as you increase the number of sectors. So it ends up at 9 hours and it starts at 13 hours. Now, if you look at night flights instead, flights that start between 1700 and 04:59, you can see that you have a limit of 11 hours of flying, and then it decreases up to 6 sectors where it's 9 hours, and then it remains at 9 hours, but you say more start times are covered by the lowest permissible level of flight duration. So by 10 sectors, 9 hours is the maximum. A word about the fatigue sleepiness measure used in the 3 studies. We use the Karolinska sleepiness scale, which goes from extremely alert to very sleepy, great effort to keep awake, fighting sleep. And we know from a number of field studies that this is where danger starts to occur during driving, and this is where it's absolutely maximum. So this has been established in a number of field studies and a larger number of lab studies in driving simulators. Now, we don't use what you call objective measures, mainly because objective measures this far have not been very successful in standalone prediction of sleepiness or fatigue. The only factor that's been really successful is lane crossings in driving experiments. But this is the scale that we're using in 3 studies that I'm going to present data on. I also want to indicate the relation between lane departures, white line crossings in field studies of real driving. And we've done several of these, and this is just one example showing the exponential development, and that things start to happen between 6 and 7 on the Karolinska sleepiness scale at the bottom. And of course, it's at 9, you have a 25% probability of crossing a white line in the next 5 minutes. So we put the limit here between 6 and 7, actually at 7, where 5% of the time people will actually cross a line after having reported a certain amount of sleepiness of 7. And EEG and EOG measures are less consistent. They're correlated with sleepiness, but they're not really possible to use as standalone indicators of extreme sleepiness. Now, the first study is, it says study, it should be study. It's about aircrew sleepiness and flight time limitations. And that's been carried out on behalf of the EASA together with the collaborating organizations I was talking about before. So this has been a large study where we had, first the characteristics that we looked at. This is strictly regulated by EASA. They explain very carefully what they want us to investigate. So it's night FTPs, early morning starts, late endings, FTP duration for FTPs encroaching on the vocal, meaning long duration FDP, flight duty periods, that cross the vocal. And they also want us to look into many sectors. And this we have done, and we have been using data collection across 14 days per crew member, 361 participants, most pilots, and 40 different airlines. And we've been measuring fatigue, performance, mental effort, sleep, and other things. We've also been using actigraph, and we used an app for rating Karolinska sleepiness scale, and also other variables, including a PVT for a small portion of the participants. So all measurements analyzed are those at the top of descent. That's when you start your landing procedure, usually abbreviated to TOD, top of descent. And we've used logistic regression, schedule characteristics versus high sleepiness. So it's a simple logistic regression. And this is the main result from the first study. The schedule characteristics are flight duty period duration, night, non-night, sleep past 24 hours, time awake, and number of sectors. And when we look at them one at a time, we find that flight duty period duration, night flying, and sleep past 24 hours are significant, but when we put them in the multiple logistic regression, we end up with only 2 of them significant, meaning night flights, more than 3 times increase of the risk of having more than 7 on the KSS. And we also have sleep past 24 hours, which reduces the risk of having high sleepiness, as we call it, KSS above 7. So time awake and a number of sectors turn out not to be significant. But I should say that the number of sectors here are relatively limited. So in normal flying, you only reach about 4 sectors a day. Rarely you reach 5 sectors. So there's a certain limitation. And when we look at long flights, which is a particular interest, night flights and long flights. And when we have the dichotomy at 10, which is the normal limit for night flying, we have absolutely no effects on sleepiness and fatigue. So it simply doesn't matter whether you fly for 12 hours or 6 hours. It doesn't have any effect on sleepiness or fatigue. This might sound strange, but the results are quite clear. Now, you must understand also that the maximum duration possible at all is 13 hours. So if we have had people flying for 20 hours, we probably would have gotten results. But within the limitations of the systems, the effect of duration of flying is very marginal. And so we ended up by suggesting to the EASA that we should have a special consideration, not so much for the traditional subdivision of types of flight, but we would focus on what we call deep nights, which is flights that start before the WOCL and include the WOCL, because they have the highest probability of showing a high sleepiness. And we should also focus on those that end within the WOCL and those that start in the WOCL and those that start between 5 and 7 in the morning. So we have a gradual increase of the probability of high excessive sleepiness with the type of FTP. So the main part here is the encroachment on the WOCL, particularly the entire WOCL. This, by the way, is the sleepiness propensity in day flying. So the conclusion from this first study is that the important ones are those that include the entire WOCL, that end or start in the WOCL, and those which have reduced sleep. And FTP duration and number of sectors do not seem to be important within the limits of the present system. So maybe one could interpret this as meaning that the present system is working quite well in terms of flight duty period duration and the number of sectors. Number 2 concerns ultra short haul operations during daytime without night FTPs. This is very short flights, and we have many sectors flown. The reason that we did this study is partly because we wanted to look at conditions where you have a lot of sectors. And in this case, we get up to 8 or 9 sectors, but very short ones. So what happens? Well, the methods, same as before, roughly. We have 110 aircrew, mainly pilots, and a high number of very short sectors. And the phone app, like the previous one, for rating Karolinska sleepiness scale. And we have ratings at the start, middle, and end of the flight duty period. And again, we use a mixed model regression for predicting sleepiness, in particular, sleepiness above 7, high sleepiness. So the result of this study is just published. Is the following. This is model 1, which is all predictors added singly. And this is model 2, where all sectors are added together. And what we find here is that whereas flight duty period duration and number of sectors and duty type, very late, early, deep early, and sleep, all are significant in this system. But when we enter all of them together, we get this pattern. The main predictor, again, is sleep duration. And as you see, it has a negative protective effect, -0.26. We also have the duty type, the early, very late, and early and very early flights, which are significant. And here also FTP duration turns out to be significant, but not the number of sectors, despite the fact that we have up to 8 sectors. So this is predictions during for the last events during the last 24 hours. So this is a 24-hour window on sleepiness and prediction. And this is just as an example, the relation between sleepiness and sleep duration. So we have a very low sleepiness at the duration of 13 or 12 hours, and almost 7 as a mean for durations of no sleep at all. Now, if we look at accumulation, another aspect of fatigue across 7 days. So this aircrew are actually allowed to fly for 7 days, have a special derogation. Now, which are the main predictors? So let's look at the model 2, where we have all predictors at the same time. Again, we find that sleep duration is the main predictor. Number 2 is actually duty time. And duty time, this is accumulation of sleep. So the more sleep you get during the 7 days, the lower sleepiness will get. And the same with the duty time. The more, well, the opposite. The more duty time in hours that you are active, the higher the sleepiness will be. If you look at day duties here, for instance, it's significant, not all that much, but still, the more day duties you have during the 7 days, the lower your sleepiness will be. Then also sectors and block time, which is the time between the blocks off, when you take off the blocks to start the plane, and when you put them on again, which is block on. It's also significant, and also very early duties. So this is what it looks like across work period, accumulated sleep across a week, up to 60 hours. And we have a, not all that dramatic, but still, you have a dramatic, you have an undramatic decrease of sleepiness across the 60 days of working across a week. Now, one question in this study was actually, is it okay to work for 60 hours? And it appears to be fairly okay to work. Now, what's important in this study? Well, it's the sleep duration and early late flights, which are important, and but it's also the flight duration, not sectors, but accumulation of early, late FTPs as well as FTP duration. But accumulation of day FTPs is predictive. So we have a few indicators here which might be used as input to new regulations. Number 3 involves another approach. This is long-haul airline pilots who are chronically sleepy. Why are they chronically sleepy? Well, we're looking at pilots on the Helsinki East Asia route and back. 51 pilots. We have app ratings. We have KSS on the app, and we have sleepiness groups. So the pilots who are always sleepy, that's defined as having at least one rating of high fatigue or sleepiness per flight. And pilots sometimes sleepy, that's some flights with at least KSS above 7. And pilots ever sleepy or never sleepy, it should be, no flights with KSS above 7. So that's our definition. And this is what it looks like when you plot the mean KSS. You start in Helsinki, and sleepiness is equal in the 3 groups. But then towards, this is top of climb, when you reach your cruising level. And this is cruising phase at the top level. And this is time of descent, top of descent. And as you can see, they start to differ gradually more and more. And this is blocks on where you have landed. On the way back, you get, well, not a similar pattern, because sleepiness is the difference between the 3 groups. This is the always sleepy group, then. It's quite considerable during the first phase of the flight, but it becomes less of a difference towards the end, mainly because you're entering home base daytime. So you have circadian effects at the end. But still, this is the sleepiness level on the average of these three groups. And which are the predictors then? So this is on the Helsinki-Asia outbound route. Time in bed, for instance, habitual time in bed does not differ significantly between the three groups of never sleepy, sometimes sleepy, always sleepy. But the main sleep length prior to FTP is highly significant, and so is nap sleep length and total sleep length if you add the two together. Sleep efficiency is actually significant too, and the sleep-wake ratio. Subjective sleep quality is not a part of this. Now, this is the homebound route, Asia to Helsinki, and we find here that there's a strong effect of main layover sleep in Tokyo or Beijing or Hong Kong or wherever. And we see that the never sleepy group gets only 5.7 hours. The sometimes sleepy group gets 5 hours. And the always sleepy group only gets 4.25 hours. So there's a certain sleep deficit there, which explains the high sleepiness levels in that group. So the important things about chronic sleepiness in pilots and long-haul pilots is sleep, short sleep before outbound and homebound flights. That seems to be the main idea. And there's no link with self-rated disturbance. So to conclude, what we find is that the only scheduling factors that seem to be of importance for high sleepiness seems to be those that encroach on the vocal. And this particularly involves FTPs that contain the whole vocal, but also those who end or start in the vocal. That is very late and very early flights. And the mechanism is definitely interference with sleep. The other scheduling factors like number of sectors, duration of flight duty period, seem to have marginal effects only, but they do show up in some contexts, so they're not negligible, but the limitations mean that you don't get excess levels of other factors like schedule, like sectors or duration of flight duty period. So like I said before, it seems that FTL may be effective in these cases. And finally, we also have accumulation of night FTPs, but also very early and late FTPs. They deserve attention as to number of sectors. So accumulation across the week is a particular point. And this is all I had to say. So thank you very much for listening. And now I don't know if questions will be asked now or what. Whoops.
Thank you very much, Professor Acasted, for your so interesting talk. Probably there will have, attendees will have a lot of answers, but they should put their answers in Q&A questions in Q&A, and at the end in discussion we do that
Okay.
question, we reply.
Okay.
So now we are going move to Barbara.
So I'll stop sharing, right?
Yes, Professor Acasted.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Professor Barbara Strazizar, who is the head of the pediatric department in a general and teaching hospital in Slovenia, and is a consultant in pediatrics and child neurology. Dr. Barbara was past president of Slovenia Sleep Society and past president of the Executive Committee of National Sleep Societies. Professor Barbara is going to talk about the impact of poor sleep on academic performance. Welcome, Barbara. Nice to see you. And the stage is yours.
Thank you. I'll start sharing. Okay, you can see. Yes, so I will discuss the topic about the influence of sleep, not only sleep duration, but also sleep quality on the academic performance, mainly, of course, in children and adolescents and young adults who seem to be the most susceptible for it. So I have no relevant disclosures for this talk. And here are the contents. First, we will touch shortly the relationship between sleep, learning, and memory. Then we'll go through sleep and academic performance associations, and then more specifically talk a little more about the school starts times and academic performance, and lastly, what can be done to improve the problem. So this was described in the sleep medicine reviews by Curcio and co-workers in his review. And you can see that students of different educational levels from schools, especially the last part of the primary school, high schools, and university, are chronically sleep deprived or suffer from poor sleep quality, and then, of course, subsequential daytime sleepiness. This sleep quality and quantity are closely related to student learning capacity, and also, of course, with academic performance. Sleep loss is frequently associated with poor procedural and declarative learning in students, because we all know that sleep is very important for memory, and that there have been already some studies who have shown that when sleep was actively restricted or optimized, that this showed respectively a worsening or an improvement in neurocognitive and also academic performance. So this is also something to acknowledge, that there are some measures that we could take to improve the academic performance in these young children, and of course also adolescents. So shortly about sleep is very important for memory encoding. I'm showing here two different studies. The first one by you and collaborates showed nicely with the fMRI that the very highly significant and selective deficits in bilateral regions of the hippocampus. Hippocampus is a structure that is known to be critical for learning new episodic information. And you can see that the activity in sleep-deprived condition is very much lower than in normally slept adolescents. And then the second study, it's also very important. It shows that sleep-deprived condition exhibited more than 40% reduction in the ability to form new memories, and which is also very important, that if we kind of divide these different stimulus types into negative, neutral, or positive, we can see the overriding retention of negative memories influenced by sleep deprivation, combined with the retention deficit of positive and neutral memories. And this, not surprisingly, leads to higher incidence of depression because of this overriding retention of negative stimulus type. Sleep is also very important for memory consolidation. Here again, there are several studies. I'm showing two, one for the consolidation of declarative memory and the other one for the consolidation of procedural memory. Here in the first study that was conducted by Engelbogen and collaborates, have shown that subjects first had to learn unrelated word pair associate. And we can see that sleep provides modest benefit to memory recollection afterwards. But when we interfere with the new associations of paired with the first word, we could see a large and significant protective benefit in those subjects who slept more. So you could see that the memories tested are after a night of sleep were significantly more resistant to this interference with the second pair of associations with the primary world. And the importance of sleep is also here could be seen for procedural task with the motor skill task into separate conditions. So first, after the wakefulness, you could see a very gradual improvement in memory skill task, but after the first night of sleep, you could see a very significant improvement in motor skill task. And this can also be done without this second time of practicing. So you can see that this improvement in motor skill task was done solely by sleep. So it is very important that after practice or after learning, we get a very good night sleep. So to consolidate these memories. And these are the basic mechanisms, the theories for this memory consolidation. So you can see this this dialogue between hippocampus and neurocortical structures, especially structures in the medial temporal lobe, and are crucial for the formation and retrieval of the memories. This is the case for the declarative memories, and this information initially needs medial temporal lobe binding, but over time it is integrated into these neurocortical circuits that are developed in sleep, and this is the basis for this eventual storage of consolidated episodic memories through cross-cortical connections, and this mesial temporal lobe is not necessary then for the memory retrieval, but in this process we get refreshed encoding capacity of the hippocampus, so for the next day learning. And the second model of this learning, memory, and sleep, and in the importance of sleep, is the role of sleep in regulating the synaptic connectivity in the brain. You can see here local increases in slow wave activity in two different situations, in learning and non-learning, and you could see that after learning we have this regional increase in slow wave activity. Not surprisingly, due to dislocation, this was a finger tapping task, so it was a motor task. And the role of this slow wave activity, and especially of slow oscillations, was supposed to be in the downscaling or the punctuating of the synaptic strengths back to the normal level, so that we can prepare our brain for future learning, so for next day synaptic connectivities. And this local slow wave activity only leaves those presentations that are the strongest. So the strongest synapses are reinforced, and the other synapses are downscaled. And here there is also the importance of the sleep spindles in this process, because sleep spindles with their fast stimulating frequency facilitate long-term potentiation of this synaptic activity. So, and then sequential processing of memories during sleep stages. So on one way, memory formation is prompted by slow wave sleep, and then consolidation more by lighter sleep, and especially REM sleep. So the fundamental role of REM sleep is the consolidation and of procedural memories and slow wave sleeps with slow wave association, more facilitation effects of declarative memories. Sleep-restricted teens show deterioration in their mood, working memory, sustained attention, and also executive functions. And there is a specific involvement of the prefrontal cortex in their vulnerability to sleep loss, because this part of brain is going through dramatic changes in this early adolescence. And as can be shown here in the study of Drummond, in a total sleep deprivation situation, you could see that this sleep impaired memory encoding after deprivation with abnormal cortical activation patterns. You could see the overcompensation in the prefrontal lobes with the same time lower activity in the mesiotemporal lobe and the compensatory activity in the parietal lobe. So this pattern of cortical activation is actually change in the sleep deprivation condition. And it's not surprisingly that youngsters are the most vulnerable to this sleep deprivation. It has been shown also that at the level of hippocampus, in the sleep deprivation, there is a reduction of growth factor levels. So what about this implication of this changed function of brain in sleep deprivation condition in according to learning and memory? The integrity of learning and memory are fundamental in the school of achievement and academic performance. And therefore, since we know that a great proportion of adolescents are sleep deprived, this really has the implication for their academic performance and learning abilities, and the consequent academic performances are more so than on just on the total level of sleep, also dependent on sleep patterns and especially sleep quality and the levels of sleepiness during the day. These are the sleep duration recommendations that you know. So if we discuss school age teens and young adults, you could see that their range of sleep should be at least somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. And the adolescents are a special population in this regard. And here's the answer why they mostly don't receive the recommended duration of sleep. As Mari Kaskaden, who devoted her professional and private life, I would say, to the studies of sleep in adolescence, described a perfect storm that occurs in adolescence. There is a biological phase delay and a decreased sensitivity of their homeostatic sleep drive. So on one side, we have these biological changes, and on the other side, we have the side givers that delay sleep, especially this screen-based media use, then increase in school works with homeworks, etc., and also a lot of substance abuse. And on the other side, also the side givers that necessitate early awakenings, and this is mainly the early high school start times that we will discuss later. And this is also the population that is under the tremendous increasing school, family, and social pressure. So most young adults should need, as we said, 7 to 9 hours of sleep. However, according to several studies, less than 8% of high school students report getting sufficient amount of sleep. And less than 50% of students report getting enough sleep to feel rested more than 3 days a week. It is interesting that the so-called all-nighters that are very frequent in students, you could see that they occur on average a little less than 3 days per month. They significantly affect physical performance especially the reaction time, but less so cognitive ability, which is good to know. However, the problem is the chronic sleep deprivation in those young people, and this, of course, can have a long-lasting influence, especially on their academic performance. So in addition to insufficient sleep, they also report excessive daytime sleepiness and poor sleep quality. More than 50% or so in college population, according to different studies. And this facilitates cognitive, emotional behavior, and of course, as well, academic failure. Almost 1/4 of students do identify sleep problems as impediments to their academic success. It's the third reason, right after stress and anxiety. And of course, there is a bidirectional correlation. Also, the stress and anxiety do have influence on lower sleep quality. So there is a vicious circle with all those factors. There is undoubtedly a positive relationship between sufficient good quality sleep and academic success. And sufficient sleep is the third most important variable in predicting grades after previous academic achievements and class attendance, as a large European study have shown. The problem is that these youngsters are usually have the reduced awareness of the extent to which sleep loss can impair their ability to cognitive tasks. And this is why, as I said, 1/4 they identify sleep problems, but most of them do not. And this is the problem, that they might damage their academic performance by choosing the wrong schedules to deprive themselves before examination or classwork, for example. The second problem is that in this special population, there is likely a great underdiagnosing of different sleep disorders that do influence quality of sleep, and in this direction also their academic performance. The most important predictions of the academic success are total sleep time. Have shown that those young students receiving less than 6 or even having more than 9 hours of sleep, they have lowest grades. It is important that they keep consistent sleep-wake schedules, and they will would be correlated with higher grade point average score. And of course, the third predictor is also sleep quality. And those 3 sleep variables account for 25% of the variance in the student scores performance in some of the studies. In a large American study, it has been shown that each additional day of sleep problems per week in the form of daytime sleepiness, difficulty falling asleep, waking up too early, sleep fragmentation, etc., they have the cumulative effect on the grade point average that is decreased by 0.02 points, with 10% increase in the likelihood of dropping a course. So these are really very important and significant correlations. And the same goes also for younger kids attending school. Low school achievement is best predicted by children's fatigue that can be seen in difficulties in morning waking up and the need for afternoon nap. Students that receive high grades have more total sleep, earlier bedtimes on school nights, and also reduced weekend delays of sleep schedules. So they have less catch-up sleep during the weekends. However, on the other side, as have shown in a large review study, poor school achievements can be correlated with evening circadian typology. So we know that most of the adolescents and young adults are later chronotypes, so they might have more problems. And also poorer school achievement is correlated with earlier school starting times. And this is something that we should be focusing on in these special populations. Higher association with sleep quality and excessive daytime sleepiness than just sleep duration. So it is not important just the sleep duration, but also other aspects of sleep, like sleep quantity and quality, and consequent excessive daytime sleepiness. One of the special populations that is a particular risk for academic performance failure with a reduction in sleep and sleep issues are medical students. In a very recent review, Seone and co-workers have shown that the academic rates correlated significantly, especially with sleep quality scores and the ordinal sleepiness, not so only with the sleep duration. And these medical students are more affected than students of other careers. Different studies worldwide have shown that there is a sleep disruption in about 40% of medical students. And this, as I mentioned, not only sleep duration, but mainly sleep quality and daytime sleepiness scores do correlate significantly with their attention and consequently with academic performance. And this is very important, since we know that they have a great responsibility for their patients, and from these issues, there might be some mistakes in their medical performance. As I mentioned earlier, there are, of course, also students that have several different types of sleep disorders that might not be recognized. And if we think about the importance of sleep quality, which is even more important just the sleep duration for the academic performance, these students are significantly more likely to have lower scores and poorer academic performance. So there is an importance that we screen for sleep disorders in students to address these issues and try to treat them. The special population at risk are also the first-year college students, because they have disproportionate number of early morning classes, and at the same time they are a vulnerable population due to this developmental issues and the development of their prefrontal cortex. They have latest bedtimes, and also in correlation with working, this school homeworks, etc. They are in their first year. They would like to achieve good academic success. They are more distressed. They are more prone to study more. So therefore, they have latest bedtimes, and consequently also the shorter total sleep time. And they have about 40% of them are more pronounced to have a great impact of their poor sleep on academic success. As mentioned earlier, also students with evening chronotypes are at distinct academic disadvantage, since they often need to take classes at their non-preferred learning times. And this also leads to the reduction of sleep quality in weekdays, and also to the reduction of sleep duration. There are also some important sleep hygiene considerations. Students living in dorms, they have many environmental disturbances to their sleep, like in-room noise, in hallway noise, a lot of parties going on, sunlight, heat, etc. And also they have disturbances due to the complex social relationships. It is very important to notify the widespread use of electronic devices at night in this special population. A lot of online assignments, they have the midnight due date. So usually they have this all-nighters to catch up the due date for different school assignments. And of course, there's also screen-based media use with their social reaction in interaction with their peers, mainly during the late evening and night. And this all lead to time displacement, to different psychological stimulation that also delays the sleep starts, and light-induced delays in circadian timing systems. Two great international studies have shown that more than 20% of students meet the criteria for smartphone addiction, which is a very concerning fact. And more than 1/3 of them report negative sleep consequence due to screen-based media use. So this is a huge, huge problem in these special populations. What about other sleep hygiene naps, for example? Daytime sleep is very common among college students, both inadvertently in the school class, as well as taking intentional naps in the afternoon after the classes. More than 50% of students, according to a study of Dangdon, reported naps at least once a week. And it has been shown that those who napped more than 3 times and for longer than 2 hours, or later than 6 p.m., they then consequently can have lower sleep quality. And then this could influence their academic performance. Longer and later naps can reduce, of course, sleep pressure, and then also contribute to circadian synchrony, and this is leading to lower sleep quality. There is also a lot of psychoactive substance use in these special populations. The 25% of students reported high-risk drinking in last 2 weeks in a large American study. And almost 90% of them reported secondhand harm from someone else's alcohol use. So this is a huge problem in this population. Also, more than 20% of students are taking prescription psychiatric medication. I have mentioned a lot of stress and anxiety in connection to their academic activities. There is, of course, also an epidemics of non-medical use of prescription medication, especially the stimulants and also the sedatives. 1 in 5 students reported use of cannabis in a large American study on sleep hygiene in students. And the second study from Canada showed that 11% of students are marijuana users. So these are in the regions where there is less restriction about the use of cannabis. So there is a fear that if we allow the non-restricted use of the medical marijuana, we might get problems also with, especially with the student population, because 80% of them use marijuana for mental health conditions that is not in prescribing guidelines, and 85% of them are using marijuana in recreational purposes. And this is also very concerning that in the study, largest Canadian study, 14% of the students met the criteria for cannabis use disorder. Another problem is also the tobacco use. It has been reported that 10% of undergraduate students have been using tobacco in last month. Especially students with greater insomnia symptoms are more likely to use tobacco, and they are also using different energy drinks, prescription drugs for non-medical use, and as well as alcohol and cannabis misuse. And these are all the substances that disturb sleep, and disturbed sleep then again promotes substance misuse, and then we get the vicious circle between substance use and sleep quality and also quantity. It is not surprising that 25% of students report substance use to promote sleep at least once in the last 2 weeks, according to the recent study by Goodhines. And there is a problematic substance use that independently predicts also academic success. So the academic success could be tagged by the substance use itself, and also by the influence of the substance use on the sleep quality and also sleep duration. So what can be done? As mentioned earlier, there is a very important that we perform periodic assessment of sleep quality via different sleep questionnaires or other screening methods in health services. And to be this a part of also academic advising appointments, because a lot of sleep disorders are undiagnosed in this population, and we should develop proper treatment and preventive programs for these sleep disorders. And then a lot can be done with education and reinforcement of sleep hygiene in these populations. So we could promote healthy sleep schedules with fixed bedtimes, fixed waking times, fixed school starting times, which is also very important. Not small number of students have a very diverse school starting times, and starting at different times in the morning. Another possible health sleep schedule intervention is to try to limit their psychosocial and environmental pressure. It is very important that we keep track about the sleep environment in these residential homes for students, to try to educate and reinforce healthier screen-based media strategies in these populations, and also try to work on preventive programs to lower the use and misuse of different psychoactive substances. It is also very important, the cognitive behavioral approach, as in any other population, for example, for insomnia treatment, but also for reduction of stress, especially before these tests and exams period. And it had been shown that this digitally derived CBTI programs can be very helpful, or other techniques like meditation and progressive muscle relaxation. So, and at the end, only a brief mentioning about the school start times and their influence on sleep and mood in adolescents and young adults, and also its influence on their academic performance. It has been shown that in several regions where they changed the school start times to align them better with teens' circadian rhythms, they have shown the increased weekday total sleep time. They have shown improved attendance to classes, and also the well-being of the high school students, with less tardiness, less falling asleep in class, and also fewer motor vehicle crashes. This was the special case in the United States, where because a lot of high school students, they drive to their classes, and they have been implicated in many of the motor vehicle crashes. With delaying school start times, the students have shown less naps and less catch-up sleep during the weekends, which is very important because the social jet lag also contributes to lower sleep efficiency and sleep quality during the weekdays. And it has been shown also that delaying school start times decreased the caffeine use after the 25-minute delay in school start time. So these are just some of the studies that were addressing this influence of the delaying of this sleep school start times. It has been shown that early risers, they get significantly less sleep, more daytime sleepiness and fatigue, and of course difficulties in attention during classes. And school starting time delay cause students to lose up to 2 hours of sleep per night on weekdays. And therefore, it is also very important to appreciate that they can have better neurocognitive performance in the afternoon than in the morning. So we should be advocating avoidance of these early morning exams for this population. This is the regulation of the American Academy of Pediatrics from 2014, and they in aiming of the reaching 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep, they kind of advocated that middle and high school starts should be not earlier than 8:30, and after that, that regulation has been accepted in some parts of the United States, not every. We could see some beneficial effects. However, these studies have the limitation because there is a very difficult evaluation of the academic performance because we don't have standardized class grading. And the problems are students with very good academic performance, even before a delay in the school start times, they don't have much room for the improvement. However, as you can see, there is some evidence that suggests a positive association between delaying the sleep school start time and academic performance, although this association might be relatively weak and not universal. It is interesting that one study in the US Air Force Academy have shown that the starting academic day at 50 minutes later resulted in improvement of grades and also the classes throughout the day. However, although not all studies found that the same effect of later school start time, it is important to emphasize that no studies found a negative impact. So it is very important that we should work in this direction, although there have been some difficulties, especially concerning with extra school activities of this young adolescent, the problems with transportation, etc., that might lead to additional costs and problems in the society to address this issue. So to conclude, the students at different levels of the education are chronically sleep deprived or suffer from poor sleep quality and daytime sleepiness, which are even more connected with possible lower academic achievements in these young people to a lesser degree than just merely the sleep quantity, and specific sleep interventions should be designed to address separately, on one side, the increase in sleep duration, increase in sleep quality, and lowerness of sleepiness. And here, different sleep hygiene measures have been presented, and it is important that we screen for sleep disorders and we try to advocate for delaying of the sleep school time. So here I thank, and I'll stop sharing my.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for your wonderful presentation. Now, before we move to the questions, I would like to apologize to all the attendees for the change in order of the presentation, but was due to a little technical problem. Let's look now at a few questions, starting by Professor Acasted. But as I see, Professor Acasted also replied for all his questions in questions and answers tool. I have also a question to Professor Acasted regarding his opinion about the regulation in air companies. What Professor Acasted thinks about that? If is needed something more of this, or if the things are moving well in this sector of society.
Well, the present situation is that the EASA wants apparently to modernize the flight time limitations. Exactly how, we don't know, of course, it's their thinking. But I'm sure some modifications will come out of the results. I mean, that's why they're spending quite a lot of money on this type of research. But of course, I think that the present regulations are working probably nicely for a number of sectors and flight duty time and similar factors, because they are really limited. Whereas night flying is not limited unless you count the reduction in duration. So our recommendations in this case to the in our official report is that one need to improve the sleeping conditions. Apparently, in some of our studies, we find that layover sleep in East Asia is very short, for instance. And this is probably for circadian reasons and for commuting reasons and for sleep strategy reasons. There's a need for improvement of sleep strategy. I think that's our main conclusion. And one has to reduce the amount of very early flight duty periods and very late flight duty periods, because they will inevitably affect sleep duration. And but it's difficult to do away with night flights. So there's a need for some sort of safeguarding the possibility to sleep. So that's where the main effort should be.
Thank you very much, Professor Castel. There are one question could be done to you also. Let's say, thank you for your presentation. Which nap duration do you recommend for adults with chronic sleep deprivation?
Well, we've done a lot of studies on sleep duration and mortality. What we find is that between, say, 5.5 hours and 8 hours, there is no preference. Mortality, which is the sort of ultimate endpoint, is not really increased for long or short sleep then. Only in the older part of the population, during people below the age of 51, we don't have any association at all between sleep duration and longevity. So it's mainly for older people, but 7 hours, that's too limited. So the span of optimal sleep is somewhere between 5.5 and 8. So there's a broad range. And I think a lot of the population believes now that they have to sleep 7 or 8 hours, otherwise they will die. And that's definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you. Another one, which nap duration do you recommend for adults with chronic sleep deprivation?
The nap duration, well, as you know, 30 minutes has been the standard recommendation, at least for time in bed for a nap. And we know that down to 10 minutes of napping, you do have positive effects on performance. And this has been tested in aircrew as well. So I'd say that somewhere between 10 minutes and 30 minutes would be the optimum duration. If you go beyond that, I mean, you risk to increase sleep inertia, of course. So 10 to 30 minutes would be what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we can move to some questions to Barbara. I think, and until now we don't have questions, Barbara. Your wonderful talk, no one has doubts. I'm going to do a question to you. How do you suggest, in a practical way, that we could do in Europe to some law, European law, to change the start school times? namely in adolescents, where the normal sleep delay they have. You have any practical suggestion or of a European movement to that?
Yeah, as I have shown, there is not a very clear, I mean, strict correlation. So not all of the studies have shown it, but we could see that some of the parts of world where they actually already implemented this, they could have beneficial effects. So I think we should start slowly, first with trying to move in the direction that these kids would have a more fixed starting of the school, because higher than you go, so in those older populations, like the last triad of the primary school, the high school, and the students, they get less and less regular daily school starts. And they also get more and usually earlier school starts, which is in the total wrong direction. So we should more educate. I think it's not already prepared to try to make a kind of a European rule or law about it, because we need more data, because some of them then some studies have shown actually that with delaying school starts, sometimes they also you could also delay the sleep timing. So I think that it is important that first we started already in the ANSS. We have gathered information about sleep school starts in different parts of the Europe. So this is the first level, I'd say, and afterwards we would of course should be advocates for trying to use these, because on the other side, many of the obstacles are the obstacles, as I mentioned, those extra school activities like different sport performances, musical school, etc., and also the problems about the transportations. But this could be addressed, and this could be also some of the studies have shown that it might not necessarily be very cumbersome and very expensive to try to organize a different type of transportation for the students and high school kids. So it is a direction. So I would say, like, a lot of these initiatives, we should address this, but it is also very important that we address this problem of sleep deprivation in this population that is not only induced by the early school starts.
Thank you very much. You have a question now. If we delay school start time in the morning, is there any risk that late sleepers, teenagers, go to bed later and do not actually increase time in bed?
Yes, as I mentioned, but actually the studies have shown that there is even if they delay the start of the bedtime, there is a gain in the quantity of sleep, because we must know that they have this biological preference for delaying their circadian sleep timing. So it is important not just to accept delaying of the school starts, but it's also very important to address the issues, especially about the electronic device use and the screen time use in the evening. So we have to advocate for all together. Otherwise, we might have this problem of only delaying the sleep start and not gaining more sleep.
Another question. Wonderful webinar, great speakers. Can Dr. Trazizar talk a little more about chronic sleep deprivation or chronic poor sleep quality on neurocognitive development in adolescence and emerging adulthood? I think this is another theme. Barbara.
Yeah, as I have shown, the chronic sleep deprivation definitely can have the influence on their academic performance, because this study that's only try to analyze the acute sleep deprivation with this so-called all-nighters. They don't have that much influence on the academic performance. So actually, they can have the same performance on the test, even if they try to, so they have acute sleep deprivation. However, in the chronic sleep deprivation, we have then a complex issue. So it is not only the influence, direct influence on the performance, but as I mentioned, with chronic sleep deprivation, these special populations are more prone to more substance use and different types of non-healthy sleep, non-healthy lifestyle, and they are more prone to different type of injuries in sports, in traffic, etc. And this all, then again, the substances can have the secondary effect on sleep. So then we have the cumulative effect on their sleep deprivation and the vicious circle. So it is a very huge area of interest. And also we know that the chronic sleep deprivation in this earlier time can also have long time influence on the development of their brain development as well.
Thank you, Barbara. Another one, could it be harmful for teachers' sleep to change the starting time in school?
Yes, I mean the teachers are I could say one on one side. Another problem in this, not just extra school activities and the transportation, etc. Many of them would prefer earlier school starts, just to have more time for their leisure activities in the afternoon. But if we work also with this special population, try to emphasize why it is very important that their students get enough sleep, and we should also advocate that they take into the consideration this circadian biological fact for this growing population, that they try to plan the examinations, etc., in accordance with their circadian timing system. So this is another population that should be addressed, and trying to help the students and this schooling population.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, I think I have only one question, and it's all. No one has more questions for you. I'd like to ask you if you have an idea how are European countries regarding the situation of nap for children between 3 and 5 years old. Because in Portugal, many places don't let children to nap. That is very bad for health and so. And I don't know how are the other countries, if you have an idea, and in Slovenia, how it is also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have specific epidemiological data, and we also did not address this question in this survey of that was performed in the ANSS inside of different European sleep societies. However, as I see it in my country, we have a very good this kindergarten the network. However, sometimes I do receive some messages from parents, and they kind of would like their kids not to be napping in the kindergarten. But on the other side, we also have some institutions where the napping is not very, how should I say, it's not very propagated. But it is very important, I should say, that we should also advocate for this, that children in this age, they do need nap. It is true that some of them and they are abolishing the nap very early, and the other ones are keeping it until the time of school. But the situation in our country is that those 5-year-old kids that are being prepared to enter the primary school next year are in a way very they are treated that they would omit the napping in the kindergarten. So, but I have no data for other places.
Thank you very much. Let's see, there are another. Is a question for you or Professor Castel. Which sleep questionnaire do you recommend to use for assessing sleep quality in research clinical practice? Professor Castel.
Well, I mean, the ISI is the most popular questionnaire at the moment, but we are a bit backwards. So we still use our Karolinska Sleep Questionnaire, mainly because we have a lot of reference data for it. So the Pittsburgh Sleep Questionnaire is, of course, also good, but I think the ISI is taking over the market.
Okay, thank you. So I think there are one more question. Let me see. No, it's only to say thank you. Okay, so I think after this thought-provoking webinar, I think that no one has doubts that sleep deprivation is and will always be a challenge for sleep research field. But even though we can change the world as quickly as we would like, we definitely should try to change it step by step with proactive awareness based on scientific data. I also believe that we have the obligation to influence European policymakers about the urgent need to implement preventive measures and regulations in relation to this subject. Thank you. I would like to thank you to everyone for participating. I hope you enjoy it. So bye-bye. Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.